right. As Juan, thank you for the introduction. Is everybody in here? I think yes. All right, let me start. My name is Nick Abbingh, managing partner from cannabisdrying.com. I do have to say I have a bit of a stomach issue, so for security reasons, I'm going to do this presentation sitting, just to keep it safe. Well, cannabisdrying.com, and by the way, I'm quite fine at doing presentations. I'm not so skilled in making PowerPoint, so please just watch the words and not the slides. Who are we? Or let me just tell you the story of from how we started till how I ended up sitting here in Cape Town at this stage. We started 50 years ago. The mother company Agla Techniek was founded by Jan's dad, and 10 years later, so 40 years back, Jan took over. Jan was here with me yesterday. Unfortunately, he is quite ill right now. I just checked at him at the hotel, but he's having a bad fever. And then Jan started selling flower bulb drying systems, mainly in the Netherlands. Proceeded on to drying lots of onions and garlic in Charlotte and in France. And since about 20 years, he does worldwide vegetable seed drying. And we also have a couple installations for that running in South Africa, for Bayer Monsanto, Rijkswaan, these kind of companies. And then about 6 years ago, we started with cannabis. We got an inquiry from a Californian client who was a formal flower bulb grower. He didn't like the way cannabis was dried, and he wanted us to invent a new system for him. And we made a really big drying system in California, which is still running. The system can process up to 3,000-4,000 kilos dried per week, but the system is completely made out of wood. So my director, he went to the trade show afterwards, and he was presenting the system. And then he quite rapidly found out that wooden drying system is not the way to go to. Then he put the project on hold, and then I came in the company, which is about 4 years ago, and I, together with Jan, together with other partners, developed the systems to be EU GMP compliant, and we're selling them worldwide right now. Then how did we end up in South Africa? Well, once I was at the trade show, the Green Tech in Amsterdam, where I met Erna, and she took my card and she said, "I will contact you," which happens a lot at trade shows, but people never make contact. And then some Juan guy keeps sending me inquiries from the Joburg area, and then we sold the system, and I still had no clue who Juan was, but he keeps giving me leads, so I thought, well, this is a good guy. And then he asked, do you want to come to the show in Joburg, which was last November? So we went to Joburg, had a good show there, we visited like eight clients afterwards. We made a nice trip. So yeah, that was quite a big success, so that's why we are back for the second show in Cape Town. And Juan, thank you for inviting us again. Well, this is done. Well, how do they normally dry cannabis? There are two main methods. One is by placing buds on these, let's kind of say, bakery rack things. And the other one is by hanging plants, or most of the time branches of the plants, in a drying room, which is then temperature, humidity controlled, or should be temperature, humidity controlled at least. Most often they use a horizontal airflow. And we always use a top-down airflow. With an horizontal airflow, if we look at tray drying first, your air will go over and under the product, but not through the product. And if you go over and under it, you will have a less homogeneously dried product, a bigger risk of wet spots. And wet spots is where your mold can emerge. And as we are doing mainly medical products, mold is what we try to prevent. With hang drying, this problem is even a bit larger, because air always seeks the road of least resistance. So the most dense parts of the plants, which are the parts that need the most airflow, will receive the least airflow. So that's why we do top-down drying. And let me first give you my point of view of hang drying versus tray drying. We did a research about 3 years back at a client of ours in Arizona, and to compare the two methods. So what we did is we placed a wooden, they allow that in the States, a plenum with a stainless steel pellet with 200 trays on it in a drying room. Behind the pellet there is a ventilator sucking air top down through it. and we compared the terpenes drying methods. There were no significant differences in cannabinoid and terpene content, but our system was about 5 times more space efficient. Then my point of view on tray drying versus hang drying. Personally, I'm a bigger fan of tray drying. It's more controlled, it's more space efficient, it gives you a more homogeneously dried product. They always say that the downside is you will get flat spots. And if you first de-leaf the flower, then dry it on a tray, and then dry trim it afterwards, and the flat spots problem is very minimal. But it's also quite cultivar dependent. You will know as growers, some cultivars are rock hard, they won't get flat. But some cultivars are very loose, they will get a little bit flat. And as we are producing a medical product, but we are selling it in Australia, the people consuming it are, maybe they have some issues, but most of them are recreational consumers. So the flat spot thing can be a bit of an issue, depending on the market where you go to. So, but I'm a tray dryer, but we do both. Yes, as I said, we do a top-down drying systems for the trays. Yes, the trays. The trays are 60 by 40 centimeters. I got a couple at my stand if you want to have a look at them. They're made from ABS thermoplastic, which is, we added an anti-static component to the plastic, so the plant material doesn't stick so much to the trays. You would know if you put cannabis in a plastic bag, then the terpenes go to the stick to the outside of the bag, or the terpenes, the kief, and adding an anti-static component to the plastic prevents that. They're easily stackable, and if you stack them, they are becoming an airtight unit. You can clean them if you have a small installation. For bigger installations, if they have a couple hundreds of trays, we also supply tray washers. Then another thing that we always include in our installations are HEPA filters. Obviously, we didn't invent HEPA filters, but we use them. The HEPA filters filter 99.95% of the particles larger than 0.3 micron, which means that we filter out all the bacteria, mold, mildew, before it reaches the product and after it leaves the product. If we combine the two together, you have a layer of filters at the bottom, then you have trays in the middle and a layer of filters on top. So the ingoing air is filtered and the outgoing air is also filtered. We filtered the outgoing air to make sure that cleaning of the rest of the installation becomes way easier. Together we call this a sandwich unit. I gotta blame Jan for this name, it's a terrible name, but we call it like this, and we use this in our various installations. These are our tray drying installations. Let's start with the one on the left. That's a drying cabinet. We have single, double and triple versions, and they do from 80 to 20 kilos. So therefore, they can be used in small indoor facilities, but we mainly sell them to R&D companies. Then let's go to the system on the right, which are the drying cells. This is about the system that we have as a wooden system in California. Only we replaced the wood with sandwich panels, added stainless steel, added the trays, added the filters, and then we try to sell this, which is hard because it is in a GMP environment and it needs a forklift to operate. Forklifts don't drive in GMP environments. So that system was out as well. You can use it for some other practices, for CBD drying. But our main system that we sell are the mobile drying pellets, which is a similar system, only we took out the pellets, make them maneuverable by hands, so you can manually put them in your clean room, drying room, which without the use of a forklift. Well, then we have the drying cabinets. As said, we have single, double and triple versions, and they're created from sandwich panels. They have a clean coating on the sandwich panels, so you can use them in GMP facilities. And on the left bottom, you see how they look. And then the picture to the next to it, you see how we mainly build them in. We build them in the wall. And we build them in the wall because then only the door sticks out in our GMP area. So only the door is considered GMP, but behind it, we consider that the technical area, which is from a logical point of view, complete bollocks, but it makes your GMP process a lot easier. So build them in the wall, call your door GMP, call the rest technical area, and validating the system becomes way easier. Is it logical? No. Does it work like that? Yes. Well, how do the systems work? This guy who's not wearing the right suit to be in the GMP area fills up the system. Then he adds all the trays, adds the filter on top, closes the door, and then he starts the drying process on our ABC computer, which I will tell you about later. Then the air goes top down through the trays. A part of this air goes via tube E to a conditioning unit. In the conditioning unit, first we extract moisture with an absorption dryer. And then the absorption dryer has the silica gel in it. And afterwards, after the absorption dryer, the air is heated up a bit. So we have to cool it down again with a cooler. Then it goes back into the system, mixes with the process air, and that's how we dry it. Then the mobile drying pellets. The mobile drying pellets can hold up to 200 trays. But one tray, if you buck the product and dry it, has a capacity of about 140 grams. So let's say we can do about 30 kilos per pellet. Here you see some pictures. And the pictures on the bottom are an installation that we recently installed in Macedonia, which is sold by my good friend from cannabis, Nick Brucianos. And in this system, we did a rebuild of an existing drying room. They had a couple drying systems there, which was not working properly. And so it was working okay, but the throughput was too low. And we had to squeeze out more throughput in the same drying room. So this room does 200 kilos dried at 40 square meters. I don't know how your square meters to kilo average is, but I think that's quite high. And with this system, because it was a rebuild, we had to install two of those machines, which are the air handling units, which you can see right on top. We had to install them. Normally we install them at ground floor at the same level and connect air ducts. In this case, there was no place ground floor, so we had to install them in a ceiling. So my installer and me spent our complete Christmas break getting two 800 kilos machines up a ceiling and installing it there. So we don't prefer doing rebuilds, but we can do it. But it's better to have a good plan when you build up your facility. You save the cost of rebuilding it and your design becomes much more convenient. Then how do they work? The air gets sucked through the pellets. A part of this air goes to the air handling unit. In the air handling unit, we make use of heat pumps. So first we cool the air down to condensate water out of it. Then we reheat the air with a heating coil. And it goes to another set of HEPA filters back into the drying room. That's in a nutshell how this system works. Then we have, which is interesting for the South African market, the drying tables. The drying tables are 60 by 80 centimeters. You can dry 10 kilos in them and you can place them in an existing drying room. So it has no HVAC, it's just the drying system. So if it's the case that you're satisfied with the capabilities of your HVAC, but you're not putting through enough kilo in the drying room, you can place these guys in and then you can have a bigger throughput in your existing drying room. Then this is a system that we cannot sell for GMP because it needs the forklift. So I will go through it briefly, but you can stack the pellets on top of each other. System works the same as the mobile drying pellets, only they're stacked vertically on top of each other. Then we have our hang drying solutions, and I've separated them in a medical and a recreational hang drying solution. And I first will explain why we do that. If it's medical, and what I call medical is EU GMP, in EU GMP, they tend to skip the curing process. If you want to skip the curing process, it's important that your product is homogeneously dried. So you want everything to be 10% or 11%. That's why we have this system. If you are curing it, let's say one bud is 9%, the other bud is 11%, but you put it in a jar to cure it, eventually they will all become 10% anyway. So getting it homogeneously dried is less important for the recreational or the GACP market. That's why we have made a distinguishment between the system and also the medical system is it's more expensive and it's just a bigger system. Well, how does it work? For this system, we use a bottom-up airflow because the plant is conic and we want to get under the skirt of the plant. That's why we incorporated this picture on the left bottom. We call this the Marilyn Monroe effect because we want to get under the skirt of the plant. It has, or do we have another slide that explains it better? No, let's start with this one. It has a perforated floor. The air goes via the perforated floor through the plants, through the ceiling. In the ceiling, you will have the air handling units. Then it passes through the sides to another set of filters to meet GMP requirements, and the air circles around like this. In all our drying systems, by the way, we always used a closed air loop to not have influences from the temperatures and humidities outside. You can fill the drying rooms in two ways, or but with these drying racks, which you will probably know, or you can hang bars in the drying room and then lift the bars up so you can squeeze out a bit more kilos because you can use more of the height. We just, for a project in the Netherlands, we do it with in Dutch it's called a takel. I don't know if in Afrikaans it's the same, but we put two drying carts on top of each other to squeeze the max out of the available square meters. Then our recreational hang drying solution. In our recreational hang drying solution, we will have circulation fans on top. The circulation fans give you an airspeed of 1 meter per second throughout the drying room. It blows it through the racks, through the sides, and then goes to the air handling unit on top. This will give you a bit less of a homogeneous result, but as you are curing it, it is not that important to have a homogeneous result. This is a much more, cost-wise, it's a much more affordable system. Can we get this GMP? Probably, but it's not GMP yet. But we could definitely get it. I want to tell you how we do a drying process in multiple stages with our own ABC processor. And drying in multiple stages is something we do for all the crops that we dry. So not only for cannabis, but also for vegetable seed and flower bulbs. The temperatures and the humidities are different per crop, but the staged approach is the same for each crop. We do that with this processor. The processor allows you to set a different humidity, moisture and airflow per stage of the drying process. I do gotta say, if I would set the processor, I will do the humidities a bit lower than this one. But normally 18 degrees is about a point that some guys that use the system do it constant at 18. Some guys do stage 1, 18, from stage 2 to 5, 16. But it's a bit a touch and feel you need to get with the installation. But we will move from stage 1 to 2 after or the ingoing air and the outgoing air have reached the same humidity value, which means that if you reach the same humidity value, you have reached an equilibrium. Let me explain it differently. If the ingoing air and the outgoing air have the same humidity value, we can draw the conclusion that at this humidity value, we are not drying the product any further. So the product has reached an equilibrium with the air around it. So we can blow as much air through it as we like from that humidity content, but it will never dry the product any further. That's also how we prevent over drying it, by having very stable temperature and humidity controls. So it moves to the next stage, or after reaching this equilibrium, or after reaching the maximum time. Stage 1, our product enters the drying room. It has a moisture content of around 80%. Our goal is to get rid of half of this moisture in the first 24 hours to prevent problems with mold growth. Do we succeed in this always? No. Some cultivars are just too hard to get all of the moisture out, half of the moisture out in the first 24 hours, but that is always the goal. But this leaves a bit of a disbalance. So our outer shell is dried, but our inner shell is not dried yet. But we have tackled the issue of potential mold growth. Then we go to stage 2. We increase humidity in the drying room to make sure that the buds start drying from the inside to the outside, to get our buds homogeneous within the bud again. And then we move from stage 2 to 3 after ingoing and outgoing is the same, so after everything is stable. In stage 3, we lower the humidity a bit and we lower the airflow a bit. And then we go to stage 4. In stage 4, same story. And then in stage 5, at a certain point in stage 5, we are not drying anymore. We are at the equilibrium again. And then all of our product is dried to the desired 10 or 11% if you set it to the correct values. I do sometimes get the question, can you do curing in these installations as well? You could make the drying process, which is normally somewhere between 6 and 9 days or 10 days, quite cultivar dependent. But you can make the drying process a week longer and put in the ventilator to kick on every 2 hours for, let's say, 1 minute to fresh the air, where you replicate opening the jars in your curing jars, opening the lids of your curing jars. Let me show you a graph to summarize how this stage approach works with a lower humidity. Let me first explain the lines, by the way. The green line is humidity that we set on our processor. And for humidity, we use absolute humidity, which is grams of water per kilogram of air. We use absolute humidity instead of relative humidity because it's an easier metric to work with if your temperature changes. If your temperature changes, the amount of moisture in the air does not change, but your relative humidity does change. That's why we use absolute humidity. We started with it up lower, and then the green line is what we set. The blue line is the humidity of the outgoing air, and the brown line, the humidity of the ingoing air. The yellowish line at the bottom is ingoing minus outgoing. So if we follow the yellow line at the bottom first, you see we dry a lot in the beginning and then slowly go on. We start with a low humidity, increase humidity, and then stage-wise build humidity down again. You see the graphic is quite old. I stole this from the installation that's running in California. Normally, how I set them right now is we do it about 1 gram lower than is shown in this graph. But also that's a bit the touch and feel you need to get with the installation and your cultivars. Then let me talk about a couple partnerships that we have. We have a partnership with PCS NL. PCS NL is the oldest cannabis GMP company where I know of, because they did the GMP for Bedrocan, which is the first medical cannabis facility ever, which was built in 2003 in the Netherlands. So they did their GMP, but they also write my IQ, OQ, PQ documents, the SOPs, and they're also Nick's partner for the GMP. So Nick and I sometimes call him our GMP daddy because he makes sure that our systems are actually compliant. My partner Nick was mainly my salesman in the Greek, Macedonian, Israel, Malta region. But he's way more than a salesman. He's great in after sales. He helps a lot with the clients. He doesn't only do drying, he does pretty much everything. So if you have other questions than drying, I always refer them to Nick. And he's getting a more and more established name within Europe. Then we are in a couple research projects. We are in the cultivation for compounds projects, where we try to perfectionate the drying process. This is based in the Netherlands. And also in the Delphi research project. The Delphi research project is called McPear, but I think Delphi is a more familiar name than McPear. There we do similar things, just try to get the best drying process that we can find. Then to summarize, we have hang drying and tray drying solutions, both at a GMP level if needed. I prefer tray drying because it's just way more efficient, it's cheaper, it's space efficient, more homogeneous and whatnot. But if the client wants to do hang drying, we can do hang drying as well, and both at a GMP level. Are there any questions?
Hazard, thanks for the talk. A bit of a question. We use a hang drying method at the moment, which we went for just because we had the materials to do it. But there's always been a question about the extra labor involved in tray drying. So preparing, if you hang dry, you can harvest, you can hang. If you tray dry, you have to then remove that and then pack your trays. From a labor consideration point of view, what is that really? Say per 10 kilograms, for argument's sake, how much extra labor is it to do that?
It depends a bit how you do it. If you start with wet trimming, which I would not recommend because you will get flat spots, then it's quite a lot of extra labor. But if you only de-leaf the flowers and put it in with flowers and leaves, it's not that much extra work as cutting off the leaves. Most often you can de-leaf them by hand, which really is the amount of extra work is not that much. I cannot give you a number, which it is, but it's not that much.
So you mentioned a couple of times about a homogeneous drying, and we're looking towards that in many areas. In the case where you have different sized buds, and of course we aim to have a very standard, consistent size, is there a limitation with this system in terms of the sizes of buds, small to large, that would hinder getting that homogeneous result at the end?
No, there is not. And it's because if you have a very stable temperature and humidity, your small buds obviously dry a bit faster. But let's say your small bud is finished at 10%. if we have our drying in the last stage, not with aggressive humidity, but with slow humidity, we cannot over dry the small ones. So the small ones will remain at 10%, and eventually the bigger ones will come at 10% as well. And I think it's important to get everything out of your drying room at once. So it's considered one batch, and for your track and trace system, one batch is a lot easier than 10 batches.